Lord. Praise the Lord. So now on to the topic for today, kingdom calling. And I want to start off by showing you a picture. So what is this? What do you guys think this is? That's a bear? A sleeping bear. Very specific. Nice. Are you guys sure?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, you're much more confident than my focus group, which is Shireen, who when I asked her this, she flipped the page the upside down. She thought maybe there was an optical illusion or something. But I'm going to be sharing a story with you. It's called The Bear That Wasn't. And this is by Frank Kaplan. So we can go a few more slides. So are you sure? Okay. So once upon a time, in fact it was a Tuesday, the bear stood on the edge of a great forest and gazed up at the sky. Away up high, he saw a flock of geese flying south. He knew that when geese flew south and leaves fell from trees, that winter would soon be here and so snow would cover the forest. It was time to go into a cave and hibernate, and that was just what he did. So it's time for hibernation. He went to a cave. Things seem normal. Let's go to the next slide. So not long after, in fact it was a Wednesday, men came, lots of men with steam hovels and saws and tractors and axes. And they worked and worked and worked, and finally they built a big, huge factory right on top over the sleeping bear's cave. And then it was spring again. So spring means hibernation is over. So deep down under one of the factory's buildings, the bear awoke. He blinked his eyes and yawned. He walked up the stairs to the entrance and stepped out into the bright spring sunshine. His eyes were open, and he was still very sleepy. And they popped right apart. Where is the forest? Where is the grass? So stay on the original slide. Where are the flowers? What happened? Where was he? Things looked so strange, he didn't know where he was. So that's the area where he was. He's looking around what's happening? Where am I? Let's go to the next slide. So just then, a man came out of a door. Hey, you, get back to work, the man said. I'm the foreman, and that's the overseer for the operations of what's happening in the factory. So I'm the foreman, and I will report you for not working. The bear said, I don't work here. I'm a bear, which seems pretty reasonable. And he says, that's a fine excuse for a man to keep from doing any work, saying he's a bear. The bear said, but I am a bear. The foreman stopped laughing. He was very mad. Don't try to fool me, he said. You are not a bear. You are a silly man who needs to shave and wears a fur coat. I'm taking you to the general manager. So what does this man think? Is he a bear?
No.
Well, you think he's a bear, yeah, I think that's accurate. But apparently the foreman did not think that. The foreman thought he was a silly man in a hairy coat who needs to shave. The general manager was mad too, so we'll go to the next slide. He said, you're not a bear, you're a silly man who needs to shave and wears a fur coat. I'm going to take you to the third vice president. The bear said, I'm sorry to hear you say that. You see, I am a bear. Okay, and then the next slide is just him looking at him, telling him he's a bear. Okay, next. The second vice president, the next slide, was more mad or madder. He was furious. The bear pleaded, this is a dreadful error, because ever since I can remember, I have always been a bear. Next slide. Listen, the bear told the president, I don't work here. I'm a bear, and please don't say I'm a silly man who needs to shave and wears a fur coat, because the first vice president, the second vice president, the third vice president, and the general manager and the foreman have told me that already. Thank you for telling me, the president said. I won't say that, but that's just what I think you are. The bear said, I'm a bear. The president smiled and said, you can't be a bear. Bears are only in zoos or circus. They can never be inside a factory, and that's where you are, inside a factory. So how can you be the bear? The bear said, but I am a bear. The president said, not only are you a silly man who needs to shave and wears a fur coat, but you are very stubborn, so I'm going to prove for you, once and for all, that you are not a bear. The bear said, but I am a bear. So they all got in the president's car and drove to the zoo. So they went to the zoo, and basically what happened is the president asked, oh, is this a bear? And the zoo bear said, no, because if he were a bear, he would be in the cage with us, but he's out there with you. So that's the next slide. I know, I'm giving you a lot of work to keep up with all my slides. Next, they drove to the circus. Let's go to the next slide. So they went to the circus, and they said, so is he a bear? And the circus bear said, no, he isn't a bear, because if he were a bear, he wouldn't be sitting in the seat with you. He'd be wearing a little hat and a striped ribbon on it, holding a balloon and riding a bicycle with us. But the bear said, I am a bear. They left the circus and they finally drove back to the factory. So at this point, the bear is so sure. I am a bear. You might have showed me circus bears. You might have showed me bears in the zoo, but I know who I am. But they decided to put the bear to work because he's a silly man who wears a big coat and needs to shave. And the bear worked on this machine for months and months. And one day after a long time, the factory closed down and all the workers left and went home. The bear walked along far behind them, and he was all alone, and he had no place to go. So this is the next slide. This is him working, and as he walked along, he happened to gaze up at the sky. So what is he going to be seeing at the sky when winter's coming? Snow, and then what's a signal for him to go back? The birds. So he sees geese flying south, and he's remembering oh wait, this looks familiar. So the bear knew that when geese flew south and leaves fell from trees, that winter would soon be there and snow would cover the forest. It was time to go to the cave and hibernate. So let's go to that side over there where he now has a mustache. I don't know why. So he walked over to a huge tree that had a cave hollowed out beneath its roots. And he was just about to go into it, and then he stopped and said, but I can't go into the cave and hibernate. I'm not a bear. I'm a silly man who needs to shave and wears a fur coat. So the story has an ending, but we're going to go to that at a different point. But this bear was so sure of who he was. I'm a bear, I'm a bear. He lived his life as a bear. But enough times he was told that he was a silly man who wore a coat and needed to shave. And finally, when the time came for him as natural to hibernate, he didn't know what to do because he was told that he was something that he clearly is. He is a bear, just to clarify. He's not a silly man wearing a coat. And really that's the focus for today's sermon. What is the calling that God has on your life? What has he uniquely called you to do? And what have you told yourself over the years? What lies have you begun to believe about yourself? And to start off with this, we're actually going to be looking at a story. So we all have callings, but what happens when you forget who you are? And the first point I want to make is, your situation may try to tell you who you are. And do we have that? Yes. So your situation may try to tell you who you are. We'll go to that next one. Okay. So we're going to look at 2 Samuel 4, verse 4 for this. And we're just going to be looking at short scriptures we go through. So Jonathan, son of Saul, had a son who was lame in both feet. He was 5 years old when news about Saul and Jonathan came from Jezreel. His nurse picked him up and fled. But as she hurried to leave, he fell and became disabled. His name was Mephibosheth. And I know that this is a story that we've heard many times before, but as I was preparing for this message, his story in particular kept coming back. And just a little bit of facts about who Mephibosheth was. He was 5 years old when Saul and Jonathan died. And I know we all have pretty good biblical knowledge here, so I'll ask you this. Saul and Jonathan, Saul, who was he previously? What was his position? King. Yes, king. There's a couple of you who knew. Good. And he was crippled when he was dropped by a nurse. And this is when the nurse had heard that Saul and Jonathan had died. So he was born as someone who was physically able, and then because of someone's error, he was crippled. And Saul was previously king, but I even had the answer on the slide. Okay, so Saul was previously king before David, and this tells us that he has a royal lineage. And these particular facts are taken from the Life Application Study Bible. So he's living his life as someone who's crippled. And years later, David wanted to show kindness to the house of Saul. So at that time, Mephibosheth was living in Lo-Debar. Okay, so Lo-Debar, I think sometimes the Bible is very literal. And Lo-Debar actually means land of nothing. So this man who was raised in a royal lineage set up in a different time, in a different way, maybe he could have been king. He was now crippled and living in the land of nothing. And I wonder how many people here are in a situation where maybe like you saw a certain plan for your life, or you know God had something in store for you, or there was a certain calling for you, but you're in that land of nothing. But in comes David. David wanted to show kindness to someone from the house of Saul. So he offered Mephibosheth the land that belonged to Saul and a seat at David's table. So at this time, David's offering so much to him, and something that he really deserves because he comes from this royal family. He comes from that royal background. But when he is offered this, I was shocked when I read this again. But 2 Samuel 9:8 says, Mephibosheth bowed down and said, "What is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me?" What is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me? Someone who was a son of a king, grandson of a king, someone who was born able and physically able because of his situation, because of what had happened to him. He labeled himself as a dead dog. He forgot that he was royalty, and he labeled himself as a dead dog because he was lame. And the question I have for us today is, what have we labeled ourselves as because of our situation? In what ways have we taken on an identity because of what situation we're in or what other people have told us? And that leads us to our next point, because sometimes our situation, where we are, what we're around, can try to tell us who we are. And sometimes people will try to tell you who you are. So next I have an image of you, and I want to see who can recognize this. So who recognizes the cartoon here? The kids got it, yeah. Mickey Mouse, and the kids are loving it, okay. And who created that cartoon? Walt Disney. Yes, and that's Walt Disney. And what's interesting is, in 1919, Disney was fired from one of his first animation jobs at Kansas City Star newspaper because the editor felt that he lacked imagination and had no good ideas. And this is according to the Wisdom of Oz, that paper at the time, and it was taken from Inc. What if Walt Disney had taken on that label? I'm a dead dog, or I'm not creative. What if you believe that? Can you imagine being fired from one of your first jobs in animation and being told that? But he didn't, luckily, and that's why the littlest kids here still see his legacy. And he went on to create Walt Disney, and how many of us have been to Disneyland before? Okay, not as you guys gotta go. It's really good. But he created Disney World, these classic fairy tales and stories that many of us had grown up on. But what did people say Walt Disney was? They labeled him as somebody who wasn't creative enough. And this ties into the Bible. And I'm going to be sharing a story of David, who luckily did not doubt God's unique call for him. So before David was a king, he was a measly shepherd boy. So when we look at 1 Samuel 17 through 19, it says, "Now Jesse said to his son David, 'Take this ephah of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread for your brothers and hurry to their camp. Take along these 10 cheeses to the commander of their unit. See how your brothers are and bring back some assurance from them. They are with Saul and all the men of Israel in the valley of Elah fighting against the Philistine.'" So we see in the situation, this is going to lead up to the story of David and Goliath, a story many of us have grown up hearing and we know very well. But the only reason why David was even on the battlefield was because his father had sent him to the battle to give food. There was no intention of David fighting, no intention of something special coming from David. He was there just because he was asked to bring food. And when we look at 1 Samuel 17 verse 28, it says, "When Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard him speaking with the men," so he hears David talking with the men about how Goliath is dishonoring God, and in the moment David is actually standing up for God and saying, "God, who is this man talking about my God that way?" But his brother hears that and says, I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle. So in this situation where David is going to defend God, he came because he was basically called just to give food, but in this moment he's trying to defend God. A label was given to him. And what label was that his brother said? Now you know, okay. Conceited. And conceited means like you think like very highly of yourself, like you're so self-obsessed. Another label that he may have felt too young because he wasn't even invited to the place where that was happening. And just a shepherd boy. 1 Samuel 17, 48-49 says, as the Philistines moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly towards the battle line to meet him. Reaching to his bag and taking out a stone, he slung and struck the Philistine in the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead and he fell face down to the ground. So we see that David was someone who I admire in this sense, where he was called conceited, he wasn't even invited to the battle, and somehow he ends up being the one who goes out there and fights, and he uses exactly what he's always used his entire life, exactly how God has equipped him his entire life. He doesn't let the fact that his brother says that he's conceited stop him, because he had a bigger purpose. Amen. Yeah, you may think I'm conceited, but someone's talking about my God in a negative way. Amen. So you may think that, but I'm going to fight for my God because he deserves to be. My God is great, and this man is speaking negatively of him. So I think that's another point that I didn't have written here, but it's important to remember. But when you have a purpose for God, when you have a calling, that becomes bigger than your label. Bigger than whatever you're afraid of or what people may think of you, because when God calls you for something, you're worried about not yourself and what people may think. You're worried about someone's talking negatively about my God. And that becomes what propels you forward regardless of what you're feeling. And when we see this, like David has been faithful all throughout, and Samuel went to go find a king. And again, in this situation, I tried to find out like what happened before or after, and I couldn't. So this may have been before, this might have been after, but God sent Samuel to Jesse's house with a flask of oil to anoint a king. When Jesse's sons were presented to him, none of them were who God chose. So all of Samuel came, and he sees all of Jesse's sons lined up, and maybe there's like an opportunity or something that God has in mind for you. And there will be so many other people lined up who are more qualified than you, who are older than you, who are better than you, who are whatever else. But if God has it in mind for you, you can be out just doing whatever he asks you to do, like tending the sheep, and God will call you out for that specifically. And when we read 1 Samuel 16, verse 11 and 12b, he says, in this moment Samuel says, are these all the sons you have? And Jesse says, they're still the youngest one. He's out there tending the sheep. He's out there folding bulletins for church. He's out there at choir practice on Saturday, like 3 hours there on a Saturday. We have no idea how much work choir does. He's out there doing something else that you're not seeing in the moment. And Samuel told Jesse, send someone to get him. We won't continue until he gets there. So when his father labels him as too young, a shepherd, inadequate, in this moment, Samuel cannot continue until he comes. So regardless of that label, regardless of what other people thought, he could not continue. And when he came, the Lord said, go ahead, anoint him. He is the one. So regardless of what people thought or how they felt, God won't stop, because God knows your calling, even if people do not. God knows the end of the timeline before we see the beginning, and he knows who he has chosen. David wasn't even invited to the room, but he was not considered by his father, but God knew his calling. So today I want to remind you that people may look at you and they may underestimate you, but God knows who he has called you to be, even if you are not in the room where the decision is being made. And the next point I want to make is, do not forget who you are called to be. And the story that kept coming back to me was of Daniel. And he was chosen when he was young, along with a few other young men, to serve in the king's palace. And this must have been like such an exciting thing. And I think sometimes when we're chosen for cool opportunities, we might like feel like we need to do whatever we can to like make ourselves feel worthy to be there. Like you get a cool internship or you get a cool job, and it's easy to feel like you need to compromise who you are to fit whatever you were asked to do. But regardless of this, more than he knew he was chosen to serve in the king's palace, He knew he was a child of God. So when he was trained with these 3 other men to join in the king's service, he had refused to defile himself. He refused to do anything that would hinder whatever God's calling or blessing was in his life. And in Daniel 1:8, we see this resolve. It says, but Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine, and when he asked the chief officer for permission not to defile himself this way. And he ended up showing and being healthier and more healthier and stronger than like all the other men, because in that moment where he could have chosen what was easy or what would have looked good, he would rather honor God. And by choosing to honor God, a bigger blessing came his way than if he had just succumbed to what the other people around him did. And this didn't stop even as Daniel grew older. So he had distinguished himself, and the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. God had given him favor with the king, but there were people who were jealous of him. And they knew from his character that the only way to stop him was to do something that would stop him from praising our God. And they set an edict that anyone who prayed to God or any human for the next 30 days would be thrown into a lion's den. And in those moments where like a rule is set or something happens and you think, okay, it's my job, or this is a rule of a place, and I'm asked to do this, but my God says something different. I think naturally, as human inclination, we may think, okay, I'm going to just do whatever other people want me to do. But in Daniel 6:10, now when Daniel learned that this decree had been published, he went to his upstairs room where the windows opened towards Jerusalem. So an edict is out there. You cannot pray to any god. He goes out. Window is facing Jerusalem. Anyone can see him. He does not hide what he is doing. And 3 times a day he got down on his knees and prayed, giving thanks to his God, just as he had done before. So we see in this moment that regardless of the decree, regardless of the law, regardless of what this king who had thought highly of him thought of him, he knew who his God was. And he wasn't going to hide praying to him, even if there was a rule, because more than he needed the favor of the king, he needed the favor of the king, God. And Daniel, in his youth, Daniel, as he grew older, knew he was a child of God, and he knew who was the right king to be praised. So he didn't seek out validation from his job or people or other things. He eventually went into the lion's den, and even when he was in the lion's den, God shut the mouth of the lion. So, because Daniel was sure of his identity and who he served, he never faltered. And I actually want to go back to. I'm going to go back to the bear story. I flipped it around. I'm sorry, I'm like giving you a lot of work right now, but let's flip back to the end of the bear story to say, so when winter came. Oh, no, it should be at the end. It should be at the end. Okay, keep going. It's like a little crash course review. So Daniel got provided, great. Okay, we'll do this first, okay. So the bear believed that he was a man because he was told so over and over again. And when we look at these stories in the Bible, we see that there are men of God who know who they are told. They know who they are. And because of that, they're able to walk in the calling that God has for them. But what happens when you forget? Something that this bear very clearly was, when he forgot, he wasn't able to hibernate, because that's what a bear is supposed to be able to do. And I want to share another example with you. Let's go. I think the story will come afterwards. Let's go to the next slide. So a Baltimore TV producer told Oprah Winfrey that she was unfit for television news. Yeah. Let's go to the next slide. And because of this, she ended up with a TV show as a consolation prize, like people are talking, and then this show became a hit, and Winfrey stayed on for 8 years, according to biography.com. So again, this woman, Oprah Winfrey, knew that she had a gift for speaking and connecting to others, that she loved sharing emotions and stories, and because of that, she ended up becoming this woman who's now a billionaire, because she knew her calling, even if other people labeled her a certain way. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, now, she's estimated worth of $3 billion, so even higher. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, remember this bear? Great. So we didn't hear the end of the story, let's hear it now. So winter came, the snow fell, it covered the forest and it covered him. He sat there shivering in the cold, and he said, "But I sure wish I was a bear." And the longer he sat there, the colder he became. His toes were freezing, his ears were freezing, his teeth were chattering, icicles covered his nose and chin, and he was told so often that he was a silly man who needed to shave and wear a coat that he felt it must be true. So he just sat there, because he didn't know what a silly man who needed to shave and wear a fur coat would do if he were freezing to death in the snow. The poor bear was very lonely and sad and didn't know what to think. Then suddenly, he got up and walked through the deep snow towards a cave. Inside, it was cozy and snug. The icy wind and cold, cold snow couldn't reach him there. He felt warm all over. He sank down on the bed of pine boughs, and soon he was happily asleep and dreaming sweet dreams, just like all bears do when they hibernate. So even though the foreman, general manager, third vice president, second vice president, first vice president, the president, zoo bears, circus bears had said he was a silly man who needed to shave and wear a fur coat, I don't think he really believed it. Do you? No, indeed, he knew he was